Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Before we begin, just a little disclaimer. What I'm sharing today are some tips on how I paint skin tones and is not by any means a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. There are many ways to practice mixing skin tones. This is just what I did when I was learning and I'm still learning, so yeah. First thing I do think is very important is that you at least know the basics of color theory. If you need a refresher on the basics, then you can check out my color theory video. I'll link it on screen or maybe up here. Then I suggest you do pick out some references and you want a nice clear reference to practice. And for a beginner, I do suggest you find a reference that has good contrasting colors. Honestly, I feel like a monotone or a black and white image might be great for a beginner because then you're just using black and white and just mixing several variations of that. But let's face it, a lot of times when people want to learn how to paint a portrait, they want to do it in color. So we'll start there. So one of the mistakes I made when I was first starting out was that I chose washed out images that hardly had any changes in the skin. The models are airbrushed and they have, the lighting is on point and it gives them like a flawless look. Honestly, I would stay away from those, at least until you can train your eye to see those subtle changes. Otherwise, you'll be sitting there like me, like struggling, like why is this not working? So pick something that is clear, that has good highlights, midtones, and shadows, and you can do that with all skin tones. I have one here. So we're gonna take this image and pick it apart and get all the colors laid out for it. A note when mixing skin tones, each subject or portrait is always going to be different. There are so many factors that affect the color of the skin. That could be environmental, whether the subject is inside or outside. All that to say that there is not one color chart or formula that fits all skin tones. It really would vary from person to person and you just have to pick out those colors. So for beginner's sake, I'll try to keep this as simple as possible. Let's head over. Okay, so I have my makeshift glass palette here, as you can see, and my reference photo is on my tablet off to the side, but I'll also have it up on the screen so you guys can see what areas I'm mixing for. There may be a little difference in color depending on your monitor, but I think we'll be all right. So I'm just going to lay out my colors and I'll be looking at my reference. I do have my palette knife, as you see there, so that should be fun. I'm using Liquitex Basics for this demo. I mentioned in my last video that I prefer a medium yellow and a yellow oxide for my portraits, and so that is what I will be putting down here first. I also have cadmium red, burnt sienna, because she has like this warm skin tone. And I'll also be adding a bit of ultramarine blue to tone down that burnt sienna a little bit, and also add a little bit of black. So these are pretty much all the colors I would use for this portrait, and now let's use these to create the colors of her skin. So looking at her skin, the first thing I do is identify the dark tones and the mid tones and the lighter highlights of the skin. And so once I do that and kind of zone in on one of those, for example, I usually start with the dark. I think for her, I would start with the burnt sienna and slowly darken that color until it becomes more of the shadow color. So I do that by adding a bit of blue. Now, if you've seen my previous color mixing video, we learned that on the color wheel, orange and blue are complementary colors. So if you mix one into the other, they cancel each other out and you get a darker version or a more toned down version of the original color. And since her skin is so warm, I chose burnt sienna, and using the blue will be perfect to darken it. And I'm just holding that color up to my image. Ideally, having a photograph would be the best, but just comparing that, and I feel like I needed it to be a little bit darker, so I'm just adding a little more blue. And please forgive how I'm using my palette knife. I am so not good with the palette knife. So I've come to a little bit darker color, and I'm just gonna compare it to my image once more. And that's pretty much what I do. I compare the colors and try to get them as close as possible. My colors may not be 100%, the exact color, but I definitely try. And if you want your image to be more realistic, then you definitely want to get as close to the actual color as you can. So now my eyes are just looking around the image, and I'm going for like a mid-tone in her skin, which is maybe the local color of her skin, like the color that immediately jumps out at you. And so I'm going into that burnt sienna, and it's a little dark, so I added a little bit of yellow and the cadmium red, and I was hoping that I would lighten up that burnt sienna. Now I'm moving on to the next shade of color that I see in her skin. It's a little bit lighter, so still using the base of that burnt sienna. I'm just gonna go into my yellow oxide actually, because I didn't want it to shift too much, which I think I used a little bit too much yellow oxide, and I tried to correct it with the white just to lighten it up. Yeah, I ended up making mud, which will happen, you guys. You will not always make the color you need. When I compared this color to my image, it definitely did not match, and so you'll see me kind of mix other colors to try to correct it. And this, you guys, is where color theory comes in handy, because if you don't know what colors to add in order to correct mistakes or fix a color, then you can be in a lot of trouble. You can waste a lot of paint. So it's good to brush up on that. Have your color wheel on hand if you need to. So at this point, I thought the color was still a little too bright or too light, so I thought a little bit of blue, but that was a good bit to try to dumb it down and or to cool it down. And it kind of went a little too dark in my opinion. So I think I'm gonna lighten it up a little bit with my warmer colors, reds, yellow, and sienna, to try to get it where I want it. At this point, I am working on the next lightest color that I see. So I just used that previous color that I mixed before, and I added a little bit of white to it, just to brighten it or go up a little bit on the tint. And ended up with the highlight. So you'll see me put that down on my palette. Okay, so that last color was actually not the highlight. It was actually another color in her skin. There are actually two more colors that I'm going to put down after this one. So this next color, I added a little bit of white, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of that brownish color that we mixed before, just to make another one of the colors that I see in her skin. So I'm just getting into the lighter tones. Okay, so finally at the the highlight and I used white and yellow and just a little bit of the previous darker color to give it a little bit of a tint, but this final one indeed was the highlight. Okay, I lied. Please don't kill me. This one is the last color. Here I was looking closely at the image and I noticed this very vibrant color right where the lightest colors start to blend into the dark areas. So I really wanted to mix that up as well. And really, honestly, there's no set number of colors that you can mix. Just however many colors you see that you want to mix, just mix it. It'll make your life so much easier when you actually start painting. So here is the palette after just mixing up colors. We haven't even started painting yet and it looks like this. And we use a little bit of each color, very little black. And mind you, these are not all the colors we'll be using for this portrait. These are just a base to get started. We'll mix these up even more during the painting process as we find more colors in the portrait. And once you have your colors, you're ready to just lay the colors in wherever you see them. And so it makes your life so much easier when you mix ahead of time. I hope this video was helpful. Please like and subscribe and maybe comment, tell me what you think about color mixing. And I'll see you guys in the next one.